So, how do you help you transmit your values to your children? I think it's a very difficult question, and it's one that changes kind of with their ages and what's going on. But do you have any thoughts, advice on how moms transmit their values to the next generation?
Well, I think that my daughters have, they've incorporated a lot of our family values into their homes. And I think that's always tricky because you're in a marriage, in a partnership. So you have to presume that the values are the same. They may not always be the same. And then you've got to meld your value, your family values and history and traditions with that of your partner. And if one person was raised in a traditional family and celebrated Christmas, and your husband celebrates Kwanzaa, you've got to be able to bring those two holidays together and establish a new tradition for your children. So I think that is, that's the dance of marriage and parenting.
But I also think, I'd like to know what you mean by values, because what you're describing are, I don't know what you,
Maybe traditions.
I wouldn't necessarily call them values. They are different ways of observing things, but I think, Martin Luther King talked about the single garment of destiny, the mutuality of all of us. So I think of values as thinking of the things that Martin Luther King talked about, which is, freedom, justice, and equality for all people. When we have these conflicts today, people talk about our values and they point to the Constitution, which talks about freedom and justice and equality for all people. So I think you're talking about lifestyles, and that's, I guess, a value.
Or family values.
A family value, but you're Nigerian and you're, what's the other one? Cuban, are all human beings.
Yes.
And I think that when I think of values, I think of values that transmit or
transcend.
Thank you, that transcend specifics in an individual family. So that's respect for human beings, respect for human rights, things. That's what I see as values.
Right.
I think the most important thing that you can do is to live it. To your point, what you said earlier is that you were living the history, so you didn't have to sit down and say, read this chapter. I think kids will do what you do and not what you say. And so, you can say one thing, but if you're in your house watching your, Netflix and you're exhausted, which is the easy thing to do. You've worked a long week, you're exhausted. But it's what you do that they really remember. And it also can change the dialogue. Just even here on the Vineyard, there's a poster up for a volunteer at the fire department who got into a motorcycle accident. And there's a spaghetti dinner. And I just stopped by on the way back from an errand and just dropped off. It's $20 for a spaghetti dinner. It's no big deal at all. But my son, he's like, Mom, what is that for? And we were able to talk about, whether or not this guy has health care, how to be helpful, what is it like to be in a community. And I could tell that that little thing that took me 5 minutes and is not a big deal at all, it made such an impression on him because it opened up the floodgates of talking about
giving back.
Yeah, because I can say like universal health care, it can be abstract, but if you talk about this guy who installed our dishwasher, who has a family, and there's his picture and there he is, it would sink in a different way. So I really think, as we know, they really imitate what you do and not what you say per se.